All departments of the government are headquartered here. All agencies are headquartered here.
That is Louisiana Republican Clay Higgins arguing that D.C. residents should stop complaining. Representative Higgins is about to get crushed.
In your knowledge, ma'am, is there any other municipality in these United States that has access to our seat of government as the citizens of Washington, D.C.?
Actually, they all have more access because they have voting members of Congress and
I'll
two
ask
senators.
you to restrict your answers.
Boom. And that one is going to leave a mark. But the Republican lawmaker, with his condescension and ignorance, decides to double down.
Hundreds of congressmen and 100 senators at any given restaurant or grocery store. Is there any municipality in the country that offers that level of personal access to the seat of government of these United States?
Congressman, I've already explained that I'm born and raised here, and I've spent most of my life here. I've been serving an elective office
When
for
you were
15
growing up,
years.
did you bump into government
Let me
officials?
just finish, Congressman.
I'm reclaiming
I
my
have
time,
never
good lady.
been to an event where I happened to bump into 100 senators.
You've lived here.
Higgins tries again, this time citing the Founding Fathers.
Are you familiar with those discussions and the significance with which the founders placed the status of our nation's capital?
I know that the founders were very concerned about being surrounded by jurisdictions that might overtake the seat of the government.
Do you share that
And
concern?
Absolutely not, because what we've seen is the federal government grow in size and scope that threatens to overtake us. And we saw it. We witnessed the federal government trample on our autonomy and our safety.
And that trampling on D.C. residents' autonomy happens repeatedly. When Donald Trump wanted a church photo op across the street from the White House, federal marshals used tear gas and batons to clear away D.C. residents. On January the 6th, 2021, when D.C. police rushed to the Capitol to try and tamp down the insurrection, D.C. had no authority to call in reinforcements from the National Guard. When the D.C. City Council voted to provide clean needles to help drug users stop spreading disease, Republicans in Congress used their authority to stop that. The same with D.C. efforts to regulate the sale and purchase of firearms. The fact is, Washington, D.C. is subject to the oversight and whims of Congress. And yet, with 705,000 residents, Washington, D.C. has a larger population than two states, Vermont and Wyoming. The average resident in D.C. pays more in federal taxes than any state. D.C. residents pay more in tax dollars altogether than 22 states. What the district does not have is a vote in Congress. D.C. residents have no say on Supreme Court justices, declarations of war, federal taxes, and spending. D.C.'s representative is Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is allowed to give speeches and hammer Republicans.
Yield you no ground, not during my time. You have had your say, and your say has been that you think that the people who live in your capital are not entitled to a vote in their house. Shame on you.
Most historians would tell you that our founding fathers would be horrified by the taxation without representation that continues to mark Washington, D.C. The British imposition of taxes and other measures while denying American colonies a voice in such matters prompted the Revolutionary War. So why is it that D.C. for so long has been treated like a bastard stepchild? Well, the key driving force is a toxic mix of politics and racism. You see, nearly half of D.C. residents are African American, and more than 70% of all residents are registered Democrats. Congressional Republicans, in order to avoid talking about the institutional racism or the political subjugation that denies D.C. residents statehood, usually put their focus on something else, like the claim that Washington, D.C. statehood would be unconstitutional. But the Constitution only requires that Congress, quote, shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square. There is no minimum in the Constitution. In other words, Congress could declare that the district is the small area along the mall between the Capitol, the White House, and the Lincoln Memorial. They could note the residential areas outside of this land and award congressional voting representation to those residents. As it stands, the United States is the only representative democracy on earth that denies inhabitants of its capital city with federal voting representation. That's not something to be proud of, but most Republicans do not care.
Final question, ma'am. Is it okay with you that the United States of America has a capital city?
Absolutely. And if you are familiar, sir, and I'm happy to share with your office, the bill that our Congresswoman advanced to admit Washington, D.C. as the 51st state.
Yes, ma'am. I voted no and shall vote no again. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired and I yield.
Gentleman yields back.
Congressman Higgins, if you and your GOP colleagues are not going to give D.C. statehood, you should at least deal with the taxation without representation. Tell the residents of D.C. they don't have to pay federal income taxes, just like the residents of U.S. territories Guam and Puerto Rico. Although I have a feeling Republicans are never going to be able to resist D.C.'s money. Washington, D.C. has a larger gross domestic product than 16 states, pays more in federal income taxes than 22 states, and has more active duty military members than 31 states. Enough with the racism. It is time for statehood for the residents of Washington, D.C. By the way, Georgia's most outspoken member of Congress, Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, has been caught entering lies into the congressional record.
Will you yield?
Oh, I'll yield. Yes, please.
Yeah, when I was in 11th grade and Joe Biden made our schools gun-free school zones.
Check out that video at the link below. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.